Named after the ancient African city in Egypt, Memphis, Tennessee would be the final battleground for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is Vernon Ash reporting. Considered by many to be a modern-day prophet, in his short life of 39 years, Dr. King touched the hearts of millions in America and around the world, and his legacy of nonviolent direct action continues even decades after his passing. Later, you'll hear actor Moses Peace in his portrayal of Dr. King as he gives an inspired speech of this writer's thinking on what the slain civil rights leader might say if alive today. But first, some thoughts about Dr. King from exclusive interviews with historical figures who remember the prophet and the times. These reflections in history feature the former Stokely Carmichael, now known as Kwame Ture, Minister Louis Farrakhan, Reverend James Netters, photographer Ernest Withers, and the Reverend Samuel Kiles. Reverend Samuel Billy Kiles is a longtime Memphis pastor and community activist. As a prominent member of Reverend Jesse Jackson's Operation Push and Rainbow Coalition, Reverend Kiles has been a warrior on the front line of the civil rights movement. As one of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s closest friends in Memphis, Reverend Kiles speaks on the character of his great friend.
King could have been president of a college. He could have been on any board of directors of any Fortune 500 company. He could have been an ambassador of some country. I mean, he could have just lived so well. And he was living out of hotel rooms and traveling constantly and feeling the needs of the people. So he really became the prophet of the 20th century and dealing, with nonviolence and the truth, and did not lose his life in some frivolous, foolish fashion, overdose or oversexed or some foolishness, but was working for the betterment of poor people when he died. And he didn't have to do that. He could have been president of any black or white university, would have been glad to have a King on their staff. And so it is a tremendous tribute to him as an individual and to us as black people that for the first time in the history of this country we have a national holiday in honor of a black person. And I'm excited about it. I was a part of it, and I'm very excited about it.
Reverend James L. Netters has pastored Mount Vernon Baptist Church in Memphis for several decades. In 1967, he was one of 3 of the first African Americans elected to the Memphis City Council. As another outspoken voice for civil rights, Reverend Netters offers this analysis and words of admiration for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I had the privilege of having close conferences with him in many of the meetings that he came to the city of Memphis. I had a great respect for his goals and objectives. I was fully in accord with his nonviolent approach, and I believe that that is the only way that justice can truly be accomplished. The violence that came out of the civil rights struggles, for the most part, was initiated on the parts of whites, and particularly white law enforcement officers, particularly in Birmingham, as you know, Bull Connor, and sticking the dogs and turning the water hoses on. I think that was a classic example of what type of violence that came from those who oppose giving blacks first-class privileges as human beings. So I was in full accord with all of his goals and objectives, and I can see that his goals were more far-reaching than just the conditions here in the United States. He had a vision of looking at what was happening in Vietnam and Pan America. He saw a third world need there that should be addressed. And since that time, I have learned a great deal more about third world problems. And he had to be a prophet, because to see the need of a third world freedom at that early in history, which is now, as you'll notice, there's uprising on all fronts, in the Middle East and Pan America, you name it. Third world people are breaking out. South Africa, it's what he fought to prevent is now happening. Nobody could really see it at that time.
He addressed it
And
back then.
he addressed it even then, that this is a need, and no man, no people is free until all people are free. No country is free until all nations and countries are free. And this was just too much for the average person who didn't have that vision to grasp. But he saw what was happening now. Third world uprising all around. He saw the United States, the big corporate powers moving in on third world resources, their natural resources, and conditioning them, and teaching them in the name of giving them a missionary experience, introducing Christianity to them. And in the guise of Christianity, big business went in, and you might say Christianity rode on the coattails of big business, and went in, and while the missionaries were teaching Christianity, the big businesses were capitalizing and exploiting those resources. And finally, Third World woke up and saw what was happening, and there was the uprising. Martin Luther King saw this many years before it happened, and now it's evidence of the fact that his philosophy, that no man is free, no nation is free until all men are free. You're going to have that kind of uprising from now on, unless all of us be concerned, not with just what's happening here in our city, in the South, in the United States, but around the world.
As trash piled up all over the city, Reverend Kiles recalls the urgency.